The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Thexera of the Zephyrian Empire stood to address the assembly. Her four arms gestured dramatically, her crystalline skin shifting from deep purple to angry red as she spoke. Fellow beings of the Council, we can no longer ignore the threat that humanity poses to our peaceful galaxy, she declared, her voice echoing through the vast dome. These humans have been expanding at an alarming rate. In just 200 cycles, they've established colonies on over 50 worlds. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Representatives from dozens of species shifted uneasily in their specialized seating arrangements. The Kelthans, with their insectoid bodies, clicked their mandibles nervously. The gaseous vortex swirled in their containment suits, changing colors to show their concern. High Chancellor Mordan, an ancient Draknari whose scales had turned silver with age, leaned forward on his massive throne. His deep voice rumbled across the chamber. Ambassador Taxara Spax Truth. Our intelligence networks report that human military capabilities far exceed what they initially demonstrated during first contact. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing star maps with human territories marked in blue. What had started as a small cluster around their home system of Sol had grown into a sprawling network of interconnected colonies and outposts. They claimed to be peaceful explorers and traders, continued Thexera, but our sources indicate they possess weapon technologies that could threaten even our most advanced civilizations. We've detected energy signatures from their military exercises that suggest planet-cracking capabilities. A collective gasp rose from the assembly. Planet crackers were weapons of mass destruction, banned by galactic law for over a millennium. Only the most ruthless species in galactic history had ever employed such devastating tools. Admiral Keshtai of the Aquarian Defense Fleet rose slowly, his blue-scaled form towering above most other delegates. Water dripped from his gills as he spoke. My fleet has encountered human vessels at the edge of their territory. Their ships move with unprecedented speed and maneuverability. Our tactical computers cannot predict their combat patterns. They fight differently than any species we've encountered. Different how? Asked Chancellor Mordan, his yellow eyes narrowing. They seem to treat warfare as some kind of game, Keshtai replied, confusion evident in his tone. Our intercepted communications during their training exercises are filled with strange references we don't understand. They use terms like respawn, boss fight, and achievement unlocked during combat scenarios. It's as if they view conflict as entertainment. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The concept was alien to most galactic species, who approached warfare with grim necessity and careful strategic planning. Dr. Yelona, the Council's chief xenobiologist, activated her speaking platform. Her tentacled form writhed as she accessed multiple data streams simultaneously. My research into human psychology reveals disturbing patterns. They possess an unusual relationship with violence and competition. They voluntarily engage in combat simulations for pleasure, create fictional scenarios involving conflict, and show remarkable adaptability under stress. She displayed images of human entertainment media, showing movies filled with explosions, video games centered around warfare, and sports that involve physical competition. To the assembled aliens, it looked like a species obsessed with conflict. Furthermore, Dr. Yelona continued, humans demonstrate pack bonding behaviors not just with their own species, but with other life forms. They've been known to adopt predatory animals as companions and show fierce loyalty to beings they consider part of their group. This suggests they could be incredibly dangerous if they perceive a threat to their allies. Ambassador Taxara Nudagrimli. Which brings us to our current situation. 3 cycles ago, the hegemony of Veltar attempted to claim the mineral-rich world of Kepler 442b, not knowing that humans had already established a small research outpost there. The Veltari issued standard territorial demands, expecting the humans to withdraw. The display showed footage from Veltari surveillance drones. A small human outpost, barely 50 individuals, faced off against a Veltari battle group consisting of 12 warships and 3,000 soldiers. The humans requested 72 hours to evacuate. Thexera continued, her voice growing darker. The Veltari granted this, believing it would be a simple matter. What happened next shocked our intelligence networks. The footage showed the human outpost seemingly abandoned, with evacuation ships departing on schedule. Veltari forces landed and began establishing their mining operations. Then, without warning, the humans returned. Not 50 individuals this time, but an entire fleet. In less than 3 standard days, Thexera said, her voice barely above a whisper, the humans assembled a response force of 47 vessels and 15,000 personnel. They didn't just drive off the Veltari forces, they completely annihilated them. No survivors. No trace of the battle group remained except scattered debris. The silence in the chamber was deafening. The Veltari were known as one of the more aggressive species in the galaxy, with military technology that ranked among the top 10. For them to be so completely destroyed by what the galaxy considered a minor, newly discovered species was unprecedented. Chancellor Mordun's claws scratched against the armrests of his throne. What disturbs me most is that throughout this entire engagement, human communications remained jovial. They made jokes, used humor, and seemed to be enjoying themselves while systematically destroying an entire battle group. Ambassador Thexera activated the final piece of evidence. Audio recordings filled the chamber, human voices speaking in their strange, musical language. Even without translation, the tone was unmistakably lighthearted, filled with laughter and what sounded like celebration. This is what we face, fellow council members, Thexera concluded. A species that treats annihilation as entertainment. A people who bond fiercely with their allies and show no mercy to those who threaten them. They possess technology we don't fully understand and military tactics that defy our comprehension. The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. They had welcomed humanity as another peaceful, spacefaring species, eager for trade and cultural exchange. Now, they realized they might have invited apex predators into their galactic community. The question before us now, Chancellor Mordun rumbled, is whether we attempt to contain this threat before it grows beyond our ability to control, or whether it's already too late. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive alien fleet emerge from hyperspace. 237 ships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive markings of a dozen different species. The Galactic Council had finally decided to make their move. Well, that's definitely not a welcoming committee, remarked Lieutenant Marcus Webb from his position at the tactical console. His fingers danced across holographic displays, analyzing the incoming fleet's composition and weapon signatures. Actually, it kind of is, replied Commander Elena Vasquez, the ship's executive officer, with a slight grin. They're welcoming us to leave. Captain Shin couldn't help but smile at her crew's reaction. Even facing overwhelming odds, her people maintained their sense of humor. It was a very human trait that the aliens seemed to find both puzzling and threatening. Captain, called out Communications Officer James Park, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. It's Admiral Keshtai of the Aquarian Defense Fleet. On screen, Shin ordered. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Keshtai. His blue-scaled face showed no emotion, but his gill slits flared with what Chun had learned indicated stress among his species. Captain Chun of the human vessel, Keshtai began, his translated words carrying a formal tone. By order of the Galactic Council, you are commanded to withdraw all human presence from this sector immediately. Your species has been deemed a threat to galactic peace and stability. Captain Chun stood slowly, smoothing down her uniform. At 38, she was young for a starship captain, but her experiences during the Centauri conflicts had proven her abilities beyond question. Admiral Keshtai, she replied calmly. I'm afraid that's not going to be possible. We have established colonies here under the right of peaceful expansion, as outlined in the Galactic Accords. Our people have been here for over 3 years, building communities and contributing to local trade networks. The alien admiral's expression hardened. The council has voted. Your expansion ends here. You have 12 standard hours to begin evacuation procedures. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. Lieutenant Webb looked up from his console with a puzzled expression. Captain, their weapon systems are active, but the energy signatures are weird. It's like they're not sure what they're supposed to be threatening us with. Commander Vasquez studied her own displays. Their formation is defensive, Sarah. They're not positioned for an attack. They're positioned to contain us. Captain Chen nodded thoughtfully. She'd been studying alien psychology since first contact, and she was beginning to understand the Council's mindset. They weren't looking for a fight. They were trying to assert dominance through show of force. Admiral, Chun continued, might I ask what specific actions have led the Council to consider us a threat? Our records show nothing but peaceful interactions with all species we've encountered. Your military capabilities far exceed what you initially disclosed. Your tactical approaches are unpredictable. Your species shows concerning levels of adaptability in conflict situations. You mean we're good at defending ourselves? Chun asked with genuine confusion. You annihilated an entire Veltari battle group, Keshtai replied tersely. The Veltari attacked our research station, Chun countered. They refused diplomatic solution and chose to use force against civilian scientists. We responded appropriately. Appropriately? Keshtai's voice rose slightly. You destroyed 12 warships and killed 3,000 soldiers. Your communications during the battle indicated you were enjoying the experience. Captain Chun exchanged glances with her senior officers. Commander Vasquez was trying not to smile, while Lieutenant Webb was openly grinning. Admiral, Chun said carefully, I think there might be a cultural misunderstanding here. Could you elaborate on what you mean by enjoying the experience? Keshtai activated a holographic display showing transcripts of human communications during the Veltari engagement. The translation software had done its best, but Chun could see where confusion might arise. Your personnel made references to high scores, epic loot drops, and team achievements, Keshtai read. One of your pilots was heard saying, this is just like that level in Orbital Strike Command, except with better graphics. Another stated, achievement unlocked, David versus Goliath. Chun put her hand to her forehead. Of course, gaming references. The aliens had interpreted her people's natural tendency to relate combat experiences to entertainment media as evidence of bloodthirsty tendencies. Admiral, she began slowly, I believe we need to have a longer conversation about human psychology and cultural expressions. What you're interpreting as enjoyment of violence is actually a coping mechanism. Humans use humor and familiar references to deal with stress and fear. Your personnel showed no signs of fear, Keshtai objected. That's because they were too busy doing their jobs, Chun replied. Admiral, when humans face overwhelming odds, we don't panic or despair. We adapt, we work together, and we find ways to succeed. The references to games and entertainment help us stay focused and maintain morale under pressure. She gestured to her bridge crew. Look at my people right now. We're facing a fleet more than 10 times our size, and they're still making jokes and staying calm. That's not because we're bloodthirsty. It's because that's how humans function best in crisis situations. Lieutenant Webb raised his hand slightly. Captain, if I may. Admiral Keshtai. Sir, those games we reference? They teach us teamwork, strategic thinking, and quick decision-making under pressure. When we say something is like a game, we're not making light of it. We're applying everything we've learned about tactics and cooperation. Communications, Officer Park nodded in agreement. And the achievement references are about recognizing success, sir. When someone in our military accomplishes something difficult, we celebrate it. Not because we enjoyed the violence, but because we appreciate skill and bravery. Admiral Keshtai's gill slits had stopped fluttering. He appeared to be processing this information carefully. You're saying that your apparent casual attitude toward combat is actually a tactical advantage? He asked. Exactly, Chin confirmed. Humans perform better when we can maintain psychological equilibrium. Humor, shared references, and positive reinforcement help us stay effective under extreme stress. Commander Vasquez stepped forward. Admiral, may I ask about your own species' approach to warfare? How do your people maintain morale during extended conflicts? Keshtai considered the question. We prepare extensively. We meditate on the necessity of our actions. We steel ourselves for the grim reality of combat through discipline and acceptance of duty. That's an honorable approach, Chen acknowledged, but it's very different from ours. Humans don't need to steel ourselves for battle. We adapt to it naturally. We find ways to work together efficiently. We maintain communication, and we look for creative solutions. The Veltari situation, Chun continued, wasn't about enjoying violence. It was about protecting our people and responding to an unprovoked attack with decisive action. The fact that our personnel could maintain their psychological balance during the engagement is a strength, not a character flaw. Admiral Keshtai was silent for several long moments. Around him, other alien officers could be seen in intense discussion. Captain Chun, he finally said, the Council may have misinterpreted certain aspects of human behavior. However, the concern about your military capabilities remains valid. Your technological advancement and tactical adaptability represent a significant change in the galactic balance of power. Admiral, Chen replied, we never sought to upset any balance. We're explorers and builders, not conquerors. But we will defend ourselves and our allies if threatened. That's not aggression. That's survival. The alien admiral's expression shifted slightly, and Chun thought she detected something that might have been respect in his posture. Captain, Keshtai said slowly, would your government be willing to engage in more detailed cultural exchange programs? It appears the Council's understanding of human psychology may be incomplete. Captain Chin smiled. Admiral, we would welcome the opportunity to help clear up any misunderstandings. But first, might I suggest your fleet power down weapon systems? As a gesture of good faith. For the first time since the conversation began, Admiral Keshtai's expression showed what might have been the alien equivalent of a smile. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session unlike any in their recorded history. The Great Chamber buzzed with activity as representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness something unprecedented, a formal demonstration of human military capabilities. Dr. Yelena adjusted her translation interface nervously as she prepared her presentation. Her tentacles writhed with anxiety as she reviewed the data collected during intensive observation of human military exercises. What she had discovered challenged everything the Council thought they knew about warfare. Fellow Council members, she began, her voice trembling slightly. After extensive observation and cultural exchange, I must present findings that will reshape our understanding of the human species and their approach to conflict. The holographic displays activated, showing footage from human training facilities on New Geneva, one of their military colony worlds. The images showed vast training complexes with scenarios that seemed to defy logic. What you see here, Dr. Yelena continued, is not what we initially assumed. These are not preparations for aggressive conquest. They are elaborate training programs designed to prepare for every conceivable defensive scenario. The first video showed human soldiers navigating through a simulation that appeared to be an exact replica of a Zephyrian crystal city. The humans moved with purpose and coordination, but their objective wasn't destruction. They were evacuating alien civilians from a disaster zone. This simulation, Dr. Yelena explained, is called Operation Sanctuary. Humans are training to protect and evacuate our people from natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and other emergencies. They have similar programs for every known alien environment and physiology. Ambassador Fexera shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her crystalline skin flickering with uncertainty. But surely this is merely cover for invasion planning? Dr. Yelena Tentacles gestured to the next set of recordings. That was my initial hypothesis. However, observe their tactical priorities. The new footage showed humans in various combat scenarios, but their behavior patterns were unlike anything the Council had seen. In every engagement, human forces prioritized protecting non-combatants above achieving military objectives. They sacrificed tactical advantages to minimize civilian casualties, even when those civilians belonged to enemy forces. In this scenario, Dr. Yelona pointed to a complex urban warfare simulation. Human forces are tasked with neutralizing a hostile military installation. Notice that they consistently choose longer, more dangerous routes to avoid areas where civilian casualties might occur. They expend additional resources on non-lethal, subdual methods when possible. Chancellor Mordun leaned forward, his massive frame creaking against his throne. This could still be deception, designed to make us lower our guard. I consider that possibility, Dr. Yelona replied, but then I discovered something remarkable about human military psychology. She activated a new display showing brain scans and psychological profiles of human soldiers during various training exercises. Humans actually experience stress responses when forced to cause unnecessary harm, even in simulations. Their military effectiveness decreases when they perceive their actions as unjustified. They perform best when they believe they are protecting others. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This was contrary to every known aggressive species in galactic history. Admiral Keshtai rose from his platform. Dr. Yelona, during my recent exchanges with Captain Chun and her crew, I observed similar patterns. When discussing hypothetical conflicts, human officers consistently focused on minimizing casualties and finding diplomatic solutions. They seemed genuinely disturbed by scenarios involving civilian harm. Furthermore, Keshtai continued, I discovered that human military advancement is driven primarily by defensive needs. Their weapons technology is designed for precision and efficiency, not maximum destruction. They have the capability to build planet crackers, but they choose not to. Dr. Yelona nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. This brings us to the most significant discovery about human warfare tactics. She activated a new series of recordings showing human forces in action against various simulated enemy types. The footage was remarkable for its complexity and creativity. Humans don't simply defeat their enemies. Dr. Yelena explained, they adapt their entire approach based on the specific opponent. Against aggressive species, they respond with overwhelming force to end conflicts quickly. Against defensive species, they use minimal force and focus on negotiation. Against technological opponents, they employ psychological warfare and unpredictable tactics. The displays showed humans using everything from ancient kinetic weapons to advanced energy systems, sometimes within the same battle. They demonstrated the ability to shift from high-tech precision strikes to primitive guerrilla tactics, depending on the situation. But what truly sets humans apart, Dr. Yelona continued, is their approach to post-conflict resolution. New footage showed human forces in the aftermath of various training scenarios. Instead of claiming territory or extracting resources, they were rebuilding infrastructure, providing medical aid to former enemies, and establishing diplomatic channels. In every single scenario, regardless of the conflict's origin, humans immediately transition to humanitarian assistance and reconstruction efforts. They appear to view military victory as merely the beginning of a process that should end with long-term peace and cooperation. Ambassador Thexera's skin had shifted to a confused swirl of colors. This makes no sense from a strategic perspective. Why would they expend resources to rebuild what they just conquered? Because came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. We're not conquerors. The assembly turned to see Captain Sarah Chun entering the chamber, accompanied by a small diplomatic team. Captain Chun, Chancellor Mordun rumbled, you were not scheduled to address the council. With respect, Chancellor, Chun replied, moving to the center of the chamber. I think there's been enough talk about humans without humans. Maybe it's time you heard from us directly. She gestured to the displays, still showing human military exercises. Everything Dr. Yelena has shown you is accurate, but you're still missing the most important point about human warfare. Captain Chun activated her own holographic display, showing images of human history spanning thousands of years. Battles, wars, conflicts of every scale, and description filled the space above the chamber. We have been fighting each other for our entire recorded history, Chun said simply. We know what it looks like. We know what it costs. We know what it does to civilizations, to families, to individuals. The images shifted to show the aftermath of human conflicts. Cities rebuilt, former enemies working together, monuments to peace erected on ancient battlefields. We learned that winning a war means nothing if you lose the peace that follows. Every human military doctrine, every tactical manual, every strategic plan is built on one fundamental principle. The goal of war is not victory, it's lasting peace. She gestured to her diplomatic team. These are my advisors, a historian, a psychologist, an economist, and a philosopher. In human military planning, we don't just consider how to defeat an enemy. We consider how to turn that enemy into a friend. Commander Elena Vasquez stepped forward. Every human soldier is trained not just in combat, but in reconstruction, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Because we learned long ago that if you don't prepare for peace while you're fighting for it, you'll end up fighting forever. Dr. Yelona's tentacles were now moving in what the Council recognized as excitement. This explains the psychological profiles. Humans have evolved past simple aggressive territoriality. They've developed warfare as a tool for creating peace. Chancellor Mordun was quiet for several long moments. Captain Chun, if this is true, why did you not explain this during first contact? Chun smiled ruefully. Would you have believed us? A species that claims to fight wars in order to end wars? It sounds like propaganda, even to us sometimes. The truth is, Chun continued, we hoped we'd never need to explain our military capabilities. We were looking forward to a galaxy where our defensive preparations would be unnecessary, where we could focus on exploration, trade, and cultural exchange without worrying about conflict. She gestured toward the assembled council members. But when the Veltari attacked our researchers, we remembered why we maintain those capabilities. Not because we want to use them, but because sometimes peaceful people need to be prepared for those who aren't peaceful. Ambassador Thexera's skin had settled into a steady blue pattern that indicated deep thought. Captain, your species present a paradox that challenges our fundamental understanding of galactic sociology. You possess devastating military power, but use it in service of peace. It's not a paradox, Chen replied. It's just what happens when a species survives long enough to learn from its mistakes. We tried conquest, domination, and aggressive expansion in our past. It nearly destroyed us multiple times. She activated a final display showing Earth as it appeared today. Green, thriving, with massive cities connected by efficient transportation networks and vast areas of preserved natural wilderness. This is what we learned to build instead, Chen said quietly. A world where conflict is resolved through cooperation, where different cultures strengthen each other rather than compete, where military strength exists to protect growth rather than enable conquest. The chamber remained silent as council members absorbed this revelation. They had feared humanity as potential conquerors, but instead found themselves facing something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had weaponized peace itself. 6 months after the council demonstration, the galaxy faced its first real test of human military philosophy. The Krivak Collective, a species from beyond the galactic rim, had launched a massive invasion force toward the core worlds. These silicon-based entities operated under a hive mind structure and viewed organic life as resources to be consumed and converted. The emergency session of the Galactic Council took place aboard the massive defense platform Aegis Station, positioned at the edge of Krivak-controlled space. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was meeting in a war zone. Chancellor Mordun's image flickered on the holographic display, transmitted from his flagship as it coordinated the evacuation of 3 entire star systems. His usual composed demeanor showed cracks of strain and exhaustion. "The situation is beyond critical," he announced to the assembled representatives. "The Krivak have consumed 17 worlds in the past 30 cycles. Our combined fleets have managed to slow their advance, but we cannot stop them. Their technology adapts to our weapons faster than we can develop countermeasures." Admiral Keshtai's form materialized beside the Chancellor's image. His blue scales had darkened to an almost black shade, indicating extreme stress among his species. "Our losses have been catastrophic," Keshtai reported grimly. "The Third Fleet is down to 15% operational capacity. The Zephyrian Crystal Navy has lost 2/3 of its vessels. Even the legendary Draknari battle groups have been forced into full retreat." In the physical chamber aboard Aegis Station, the mood was equally dark. Ambassador Thexera's crystalline form had lost its usual vibrant colors, now appearing almost transparent with fear and desperation. "We must consider the unthinkable," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evacuation beyond the galactic rim. Abandonment of the core worlds." The chamber erupted in horrified protests from dozens of species, but the mathematical reality was undeniable. The Krivak advance seemed unstoppable, converting everything in their path into more resources for their expanding collective. "There's one option we haven't considered," said Dr. Yelona, her tentacles writhing nervously. "The humans offered military assistance when the crisis began. We declined their offer, believing our combined forces would be sufficient." An uncomfortable silence fell over the assembly. The Council's pride had prevented them from accepting help from a species they had so recently considered a threat. "Captain Chen's fleet is still in the outer systems," Dr. Yelona continued. "They've been conducting their own reconnaissance of Krivak forces and technology. Perhaps it's time to reconsider their offer." Chancellor Mordunn's expression was pained. "To ask for help from a species we nearly declared enemies of the state. It would be unprecedented. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented actions," came a familiar voice from the chamber's entrance. Captain Chen walked into the assembly, but she was no longer the diplomatic officer who had addressed them months earlier. She wore full combat armor marked with the insignia of the Human Expeditionary Force, and her expression carried the weight of recent battles. "Captain Chen," Chancellor Mordunn said with surprise, "we were not expecting you to attend this session." "I wasn't planning to," Chen replied, moving to the central platform. "But my scouts just returned from deep reconnaissance missions into Krivak territory. You need to know what we've discovered." She activated her holographic display, showing 3-dimensional maps of the Krivak advance patterns and fleet compositions. The data was far more detailed than anything the Council possessed. "The Krivak aren't just invaders," Chen announced. "They're refugees." The chamber exploded in confused protests, but Chen continued over the noise. "Their original territory was consumed by something even worse than they are. They're fleeing toward the galactic core because it's the only direction left that offers sufficient resources for their survival. This isn't conquest, it's desperation." Dr. Yelona's tentacles had stopped moving entirely, a sign of complete shock among her species. "Captain, are you suggesting that the Krivak can be reasoned with?" "I'm suggesting that they can be redirected," Chen replied. "Our analysis indicates that they require specific mineral compositions for their reproductive cycles. Those minerals exist in abundance in the dead systems of the void sector beyond the galactic edge. Admiral Kishtes deals illutre. The void sector has been uninhabitable for millions of cycles. No organic life can survive there." "Exactly," Chen said with a slight smile. "It's perfect for silicon-based life forms that don't breathe oxygen or require traditional stellar energy. We can give them what they need without sacrificing inhabited worlds." Ambassador Thexera's form flickered with confused colors. "Even if this is true, Captain, how do we convince a hive mind species to change direction? They've shown no interest in communication." "That's because you've been trying to communicate with individual drones," Chen explained, activating new displays showing Kree_vac neural network patterns. Human xenobiologists spent the last 6 months figuring out how their collective consciousness actually works. We need to talk to the Queen node, not the warrior units. She showed complex diagrams illustrating Kree_vac command structures and communication protocols. The problem is that the Queen node is located deep within their primary fleet, surrounded by layers of converted starships and defensive structures. Getting a diplomatic team through would require military action. Chancellor Mordun finished grimly. You're proposing to fight our way to a diplomatic meeting. We're proposing to provide escort services for a joint diplomatic mission, Chen corrected. Human forces will create a corridor through the Kree_vac defenses. Council diplomats will make contact with the Queen node. Together, we'll negotiate a solution that saves both organic and silicon life in this galaxy. The chamber fell silent as the audacity of the plan sank in. Fight through an entire enemy fleet, not for conquest or destruction, but to enable diplomacy. Admiral Keshtai spoke first. Captain, your forces number less than 200 ships. The Kree_vac primary fleet contains over 10,000 vessels. How do you propose to create this corridor? Chen's expression shifted to something that the aliens had learned to recognize as the human equivalent of a predatory smile. Admiral, you've seen our training exercises. You've studied our tactical approaches. But you haven't seen what happens when humans stop holding back. She activated a new set of displays showing human fleet formations unlike anything the Council had observed before. The ships were arranged in complex patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living organisms. For 6 months, we've been analyzing every aspect of Kree_vac technology, tactics, and psychology. We've developed countermeasures for their adaptive systems. We've identified weaknesses in their collective decision-making process. And we prepared something that no species in galactic history has ever attempted. Commander Vasquez stepped forward, her own armor bearing the marks of recent combat. We're going to teach an entire hive mind species how to play, she announced. The confusion in the chamber was palpable. Dr. Yelona's tentacles began moving in rapid, erratic patterns. I don't understand, she said. Play? In the middle of a military operation? Chen nodded. The Kree_vac operate on pure efficiency and logic. They can adapt to any conventional military strategy because they analyze patterns and develop counters. But they have no concept of illogical behavior, random actions, or strategic chaos. She gestured to her crew. Human military doctrine includes something we call creative unpredictability. We're going to hit them with tactics that make no sense from their perspective. We'll retreat when we're winning, attack when we should defend, and use completely irrational strategies that their collective intelligence can't process or predict. In essence, Chun concluded, we're going to confuse them into letting us through. The chamber remained silent as the alien representatives tried to process this concept. The idea of using illogical behavior as a military strategy was completely alien to their thinking. Finally, Chancellor Mordun spoke. Captain Shun, this plan is either brilliant beyond our comprehension or the most elaborate suicide mission in galactic history. Maybe both, Chen admitted, but it's the only chance we have to save everyone, the organic species of this galaxy and the Kree_vac collective. Because the truth is, we've already figured out what destroyed the Kree_vac's original territory. Her expression grew deadly serious. And it's heading this way next. The Battle of the Convergent Streams would be remembered as the day laughter literally echoed across a battlefield for the first time in galactic history. Captain Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, now designated as the flagship for Operation Cosmic Jester, the most unconventional military operation ever attempted. Around her, the bridge crew operated with the calm efficiency that aliens had learned to both admire and fear in humans. Kree_vac primary fleet bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Webb, his voice carrying the excitement of someone about to attempt something completely insane. 10,347 vessels in defensive formation around the Queen node. Perfect, Chen replied, studying the massive enemy formation on her tactical display. Commander Vasquez, initiate Phase 1 of Operation Cosmic Jester. Aye, Captain, Vasquez responded, barely containing her own excitement. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Operation Cosmic Jester is now active. Remember, people, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to confuse the hell out of them while our diplomatic team does the real work. Across the human fleet, 200 ships began executing the most bizarre military maneuvers ever recorded. The U.S. Thunderchild, a heavy cruiser, suddenly began flying in perfect figure-8 patterns while broadcasting classical music from Earth's 18th century. The destroyer Laughing Ghost started performing barrel rolls while its crew sang traditional sea chanties over open communications channels. Aboard the Council observation vessel Wisdom's Edge, Ambassador Thexera watched in complete bewilderment as human ships began what could only be described as an elaborate dance routine in the middle of space. Dr. Yelona, she called out, her crystalline form flickering with confusion, are the humans experiencing some kind of collective psychological breakdown? Dr. Yelona's tentacles writhed as she analyzed the tactical display. I don't believe so. Their ship movements are precisely coordinated. This chaos is intentional. Meanwhile, in the Krivak fleet, something unprecedented was happening. The collective intelligence that controlled 10,000 starships was experiencing its first case of genuine confusion in the species' entire history. The Krivak Queen Node, a massive biomechanical construct at the heart of the fleet, processed the incoming data with growing bewilderment. Human vessels were approaching in attack formations, but their behavior made no tactical sense whatsoever. One group of human ships suddenly stopped mid-advance and began playing what appeared to be a game of three-dimensional tag, chasing each other in loops while occasionally firing harmless fireworks instead of weapons. Another formation arranged itself into the shape of various Earth animals and began a parade through the outer edge of Krivak space. The collective tried to analyze these patterns for strategic significance, but found none. The humans were acting with complete irrationality, making it impossible to predict their next moves or develop appropriate countermeasures. Captain Chun watched as confusion rippled through the Krivak formations. Their ships began responding erratically, trying to adapt to tactics that had no logical basis. It's working, reported Commander Vasquez. Krivak response patterns are breaking down. They're rotating through defensive configurations faster than their systems can adapt. Excellent. Phase 2, people. Time to really confuse them. The human fleet suddenly split into dozens of smaller groups, each pursuing completely different objectives. Some ships began offering to teach Krivak vessels how to play poker. Others started a competitive breakdancing contest using their ships' maneuvering thrusters. The U.S. Comedy Central began telling jokes over all communication frequencies, while the U.S. Practical Joker started sending gift baskets filled with Earth delicacies to random Krivak vessels. Aboard the Krivak Queen Node, the collective intelligence was experiencing something it had never encountered before: laughter. The human communications were filled with joy, humor, and apparent celebration during what should have been a deadly serious military engagement. The collective had no framework for understanding why creatures would express happiness while engaged in potentially lethal conflict. As the confusion deepened, gaps began appearing in the Krivak defensive formations. Ships moved out of position as the collective tried to respond to incomprehensible threats and offers of friendship simultaneously. Now, Chen announced, "Diplomatic shuttle, you are clear for approach to the Queen Node. Best of luck, Ambassador Thexera." The small diplomatic vessel, protected by an escort of human fighters flying in formation while juggling energy balls for no apparent reason, slipped through the confused Krivak lines. Their approach went virtually unnoticed as the collective struggled to process the chaos erupting around them. Ambassador Thexera, accompanied by Dr. Yelona and a human cultural specialist named Dr. Jennifer Martinez, boarded the Queen Node through a docking port that the confused collective had forgotten to seal. Inside the massive biomechanical structure, They found themselves face-to-face with the Krivak Queen Node itself, a crystalline intelligence the size of a city block, surrounded by thousands of processing nodes and communication arrays. Great Queen Node of the Krivak Collective, Ambassador Thexera began, her translation systems working overtime to convert her words into silicon-based communication patterns. We come seeking understanding and mutual survival. The Queen Node's response filled the chamber with harmonic vibrations that translated roughly as, "What are your ship minds doing?" Their behavior patterns contain no logical strategic value. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, smiling broadly. "They're playing. It's how humans express joy and build social bonds. We thought you might like to learn. Play during combat operations? This concept does not exist in our experience." Dr. Yelona activated a holographic display showing the tactical situation outside. Queen Node, your collective is experiencing joy by proxy. Your neural networks are attempting to understand human play behavior. And in doing so, you're discovering new forms of information processing. Indeed, monitoring equipment showed that the Queen Node's processing patterns had shifted dramatically. Where once there had been rigid, efficient data flows, now there were curious spirals of activity, exploratory tangents, and what could only be described as experimental thinking. Your species fled to this galaxy seeking survival. Ambassador Thexera continued. But we can offer you something better: growth, exploration, and new experiences. The Void Sector contains all the mineral resources you need, plus something your collective has never encountered: space to develop freely without the pressure of survival. Outside the Queen Node, the battle had evolved into something unprecedented. A cultural exchange performed at high speed with weapons designed for entertainment rather than destruction. Human crews were teaching Krivak drones how to perform synchronized flying maneuvers, while Krivak vessels attempted to replicate human musical performances using their engine harmonics. The sight was so absurd that even the hardened Admiral Keshtai was heard laughing over the communications network. "These humans," the Queen Node observed, "they find joy even in conflict. They transform potential destruction into shared experience." "That's what we do," Dr. Martinez replied. "We turn problems into games, enemies into friends, and conflicts into opportunities for growth." "And you offer this to US? Even though we consumed 17 of your worlds." Ambassador Thexera's form brightened. "Queen Node, those were not human worlds. They belong to various council species. But, yes, we offer friendship even to those who have caused harm, because that's how peace grows stronger than war." The Queen Node was silent for several long moments while outside, the impromptu festival continued. Human and Krivak vessels were now working together to create massive three-dimensional artworks using their engine trails, turning the battlefield into a canvas. "We accept," the Queen Node finally announced. "But we wish to understand this play concept more fully. Will you teach US?" Dr. Martinez grinned. "Queen Node, I thought you'd never ask. How would you like to learn about a game called Hide and Seek? It's perfect for a hive mind that controls thousands of ships." As the diplomatic team began explaining human games and recreational activities to a fascinated alien collective, Captain Chin watched from her bridge as the greatest military threat the galaxy had ever faced transformed into its newest potential ally. "Well," Commander Vasquez observed, I guess we really did weaponize peace." "Not quite," Chin replied, watching human and Krivak vessels continuing their impromptu cultural exchange. "We just remembered that the best weapon against hatred is laughter, and the strongest defense against fear is friendship." Lieutenant Webb looked up from his console with a puzzled expression. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from beyond the galactic rim. It's what was chasing the Krivak." Chin's expression grew serious as new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. Hundreds of massive vessels of completely unknown design were approaching the galaxy at incredible speeds. "Well," she said, turning to her crew, "looks like we're about to have another opportunity to make new friends." Commander Vasquez grinned. Should I prepare Operation Cosmic Jester too? Better, Chin replied, watching as Krevac vessels began forming up alongside human ships in defensive formations. Prepare Operation Galactic Welcome Wagon. I have a feeling our new neighbors are going to need to learn how to play, too. Outside the bridge windows, the sight of human crews teaching alien hive mind how to perform synchronized space ballet while preparing for the next cosmic crisis perfectly encapsulated humanity's approach to the universe. Meet every challenge with determination, creativity, and, if possible, a good sense of humor. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in eons, that was definitely a good thing.